Good evening to all of you, and a special welcome to the Browde family, and especially Dr. Selma Browde, and to our speaker tonight, Malcolm Wallace, and all my colleagues who are here tonight. I feel nervous in your presence. It's my privilege and great honor to be here tonight at the inaugural Group 1 lecture in honor of Jules Browde, SC. I was once told an amusing story by Denise about Harry Truman and Winston Churchill discussing Clement Attlee, Churchill's arch nemesis, who famously won a landslide victory for Labour against Churchill after the war. Truman remarked that Attlee struck him as a very modest chap. Churchill retorted that he had much to be modest about. Jules was quite the opposite. Some would say a rare thing, a lawyer who was singularly unassuming in his estimation of his very, very significant achievements. The list is long, and I can give only a smattering here because I've been limited to 20 minutes by Pitlow. I hope that's not tit for tat, Pitt. One such achievement of Jules was the formation of Group 14 in Schreiner Chambers in 1994. Why is this important to Group 1? Group 14 is perhaps one of the most important phases of the Group 1 history and its evolution. Jules led the founding members of Group 14, among them Guy Hoffman, Chris Loxton, Dennis Fine, Cherise Wiener, Faiza Kathri Setelwane, Kumi Morocca, Patrick Michelana, Vincent Maleka, and a host of others, in the formation of what was the very first group in this country that was founded expressly and unapologetically on the guiding principles of non-racialism, gender equality, and the rights which are known today as LGBTQ+. When there was an en masse move to Sandton in 1999, after the group had been running for nearly 6 years, this brought about the disbandment of Group 14. But its core members would not let it go. They got together, among them Mohammed Chauhan, Azar Baum, the Pauls, McNally and Carstensen and Pretorius, Andrew Keemack, the inimitable disc jockey, from whom you've just heard, Terry Matau, Alan Isles, Margie Victor, who's here tonight. Thank you, Margie. Where is she? Thank you, Margie. Claire Hartford, and others. Such was the stature of the group that we even managed to lure Philip Ginsberg across the Yukske. Jules wouldn't accompany us to Sandton, and that was a great disappointment. But we understood why. He insisted on staying in town to lead a number of people, and I mentioned Timothy Brenders and Carl Tipp among them, who committed to stay in the city centre to provide leadership and mentorship where it was needed for those who simply did not have the resources to move. In effect, Jules was the finest group leader that Group 1 never had. I will return to this story, but first permit me to go back to the beginning. Jules was not yet 20 when South Africa entered the war, World War II. He joined the South African artillery and fought on the front line in every major war fought by South Africa, in North Africa, and in Italy. There's a picture of his tank in the Johannesburg Military Museum. I think he called it Frikkie, or he told me, but I've forgotten. Like all soldiers, the war touched Jules indelibly. Being the person that he was, he processed his experiences differently. He did not want to be a casualty. I was fortunate to call Jules friend and mentor. He told me that he brought from the battlefields a consuming appreciation of what human suffering truly was. One of the most inspiring things Jules ever told me was this. He said his secret to keeping his sanity in the midst of the unspeakable horrors of the war was the knowledge that he was in the privileged position of having the ability, however small, to do something to change it. This activism is part of the story of this group that I want to tell you tonight, but I'll come to that. Jules, now no longer a boy, returned to a different war. The struggle against apartheid. It had all the hallmarks that wars have: brutality, prejudice, injustice, bloodshed, hate. It's no surprise that on his return to South Africa, Jules chose to study law. At Wits, he formed an enduring friendship with a young Nelson Mandela. Jules joined the Johannesburg Bar in 1949. When Oliver Tambo passed his exams, Mandela asked Jules to move his admission as an attorney. When Mandela and Tambo Attorneys was threatened with eviction from its premises in Johannesburg under the Group Areas Act, the young advocate Browde argued their case and won it. Jules became a burr in the shoe of the apartheid establishment in the late 70s in group area prosecutions. He led one of the first test cases against the Group Areas Act in State versus Adams in 1980. He argued a novel point, that because there was a shortage of housing in the coloured and Indian group areas, and therefore no alternative accommodation was available, the Adams family, no, not that one, this one, should not be evicted from their home in a white suburb. Having lost the case, he took it to the appellate division and met a bench presided over by notorious apartheid judges headed by Chief Justice Frans Rumpf. Again, predictably, they upheld the lower court's decision, holding in the process, I might add, that the prejudice contended for was not substantial. Jules's sons have written me a letter. They speak with great affection for Jules's tenacity and unwavering commitment to doing the right thing, regardless of the odds. He taught them, they say, that important fights must be fought, even though you know you're going to lose. And sometimes, ironically, success comes from failure. When Adams was taken on appeal, all prosecutions under the Act were put on hold, pending the outcome, which meant there were no group areas prosecutions for nearly 3 years. A different kind of Stalingrad. They resumed with alacrity after the judgment of the appellate division, but Jules's work paved the way for Judge Richard Goldstone's groundbreaking ruling 2 years later in S versus Governor, which effectively put paid to prosecutions under the Act by requiring an open list of considerations to be taken into account before evicting those accused, including lack of alternative accommodation. We know that this is a key consideration in evictions to this day, and it's entrenched in the Constitution and in the Pye Act. Jules was chairman of the Bar Council between 1981 and elected again in 1985. He was a founding member of Lawyers for Human Rights. As president, Mandela appointed Jules to head several important commissions, including one into corruption in the public sector and another into racism, nepotism and corruption in South African rugby. He was also appointed as Gauteng's Integrity Commissioner, and he held this position actively until his death, aged 97. He served also as an acting judge, including as a member of the Courts of Appeal of Lesotho and Swaziland. Jules's sons are expansive about the relationship between his parents. They were married for nearly 70 years. Jules was encouraged in no small measure by his wife, Dr. Selma Browde, and we are privileged to have her tonight. Thank you, Selma. Selma herself has dedicated her own life to alleviating human suffering in all its forms. She has done this in the medical field as professor of oncology in her groundbreaking work into palliative care, and HIV, AIDS, and TB, and thank you. Is there gin in here? And as a politician. No, it's fine. Yes. And as a politician and social activist, working to improve the living conditions of the poor and marginalized through hunger programs such as Operation Hunger, of which she was a founding member, and Sandton. She's famously known as the woman who lit up Soweto for her work in the electrification of townships. She lights up her room, too. Her son Alan and daughter Susie, in law, who we are also very honored and grateful to have here tonight, have followed in her footsteps in the fight against hunger and the working towards the dignity of the people of this country. In South Africa, SA Harvest, of which they are founding members. Her grandson, Daniel, has written a book, which is called The Relatively Public Life of Jules Browde. If you will permit me, I want to say something about Jules and this group from my personal perspective. I joined the bar at age 24, together with about 30 young advocates. We were all of a similar state of unreadiness for life generally, not to mention the bar. We soon realized that there was no room at the Innes. And because it was a rule that we practiced from Chambers, we were relegated by the bar council of the day to the building next door. In reality, it was miles away. The accommodation consisted of a vast building space on the 16th floor that we were told that we were to dry wall. I don't even know if that's a verb. We were to dry wall it into chambers. That was it. There was nothing else. The hapless crew of advocates had by default decided that Ivan Miltz, who was a founding member of Group 1 and now of Rivonia Group, and myself should be appointed as joint group leaders. After we got over the first flash of gravitas, we sobered up, literally. There's something humbling about finding oneself on foot, corner Pritchard and Troy Streets of an afternoon, without our mothers, at the furniture business of an uncle we never really realized that we needed, arguing about the style of lounge suite that we should purchase for the Group 1 reception. It suddenly dawned on us that we needed a switchboard and a person to answer it, and a telefax machine, and a person who could type our pleadings on something called a golf ball typewriter. We knew we were doomed the moment the maroon velveteen lounge suite, chosen by Ivan Miltz, I might add, on credit, failed to arrive. We sat on the floor and we listened on a transistor radio to F.W. de Klerk unban the ANC and unconditionally release Nelson Mandela. We watched later from our vantage onto the M2 as thousands upon hundreds of thousands of people on every mode of transport available, including taxis, tractors, open bed trucks, bakkies, bicycles, and on foot, made their way to Soweto, to ready themselves to receive their Father. We were by degrees terrified and exhilarated. Our future and that of the country was on the brink. These futures seemed to us to coalesce. We realized we needed to work if we were to survive. And so began our quest to get a crew of seniors to make the seemingly impossible crossing over Kruis, notwithstanding its name. We needed their golf ball typewriters, and we needed their briefs, but most of all, we needed their leadership. We doorstepped group leaders and senior council and introduced ourselves as group leaders. Most seemed singularly unimpressed by our leadership credentials. We were told by the real leaders of the bar, including the chairman at that time, that we needed to get used to the notion that the bar was founded on self-interest and that if it needed to eat its young, it would do so. We were told that we must exploit any privilege, any facility that we had, to make sure that we were in line to make it into Schreiner's Chambers when someone retired or died. I was beginning to believe this when I met Jules Browde. He folded his elegant self into one of the fat leather chairs in the Innes common room, which was essentially modelled on an English gentleman's club, and to which I might add, women had only recently been given access. And he was a rare thing. He seemed actually to be listening to my spiel. I told him we had no leadership, no training, no money, no work, and that we were afraid and that we couldn't do it alone. Being Jules, he said, "Don't worry, my girl. We'll sort this." Eventually, in consultation with others from Schreiner and Innes, he agreed to lead a new group in Schreiner. There was one condition: that the group would serve diversity and inclusion above everything else. So effortlessly, Jules pulled together those he saw as right for the group. In fact, such was the drawing power of Jules that we ended up with a waiting list. After all the shut doors, I must confess to being a bit smug. Group 14 was born. We had our typing pool and professional decorators, but most of all, we had that almost indefinable essence of something special, something different, something revolutionary. A rough head count of the members of this group indicates a demographic committed to non-racialism and gender inclusivity. I was so moved when I learned that this beautiful space that we're sitting in today had been dedicated by the leadership of this group to the memory of Laverne Bailey. It's called the Bailey, not as in the Old Bailey, as in Laverne Bailey. Laverne was employed by Jules to answer the phones at Group 14. She and other staff members of those early days were still here shortly before her death. Vida, Rachel, to name but two. Jules had a unique gift. He found joy in being an activist, a lawyer, a judge. He was fiercely loyal to South Africa, and he had a burning passion for justice. But his sons recalled the smaller, everyday moments of joy, humility, and gratitude. His son Alan wrote to me, "Each morning, I am reminded of his infectious spirit when I sip my coffee, and like him, I find myself whispering, 'Hell, that's good.'" There's still work to be done, everybody. A lot of work, new work. Many young lawyers still lack proper leadership and mentorship. Many occupy what they call independent bars, and although some of them have enormous talent, they have no mentorship. There is nothing for them. If leaders of the bar, and you, all of you, who are going to step into those leadership roles, do not do what Jules, Browde, and others did now, then I don't want to put too fine a point on it. But we're doomed. Please, may I ask the future leaders to continue the legacy of Jules. I ask you to come and help us on the bench by taking up acting appointments and to put yourself forward for nomination. We need strong judges. Barack Obama famously described the law as a nation struggling with its own conscience. The bench, the bar, the legal system, the country currently struggles to shake off the hideous mantle of kleptocracy and the indigence of body, mind, and spirit that this has brought to us. We are in the midst of a new struggle for the soul of this country. Like Jules on the battlefield, may we all find some sanity and comfort in the fact that we can and are doing something to win the war. Thank you.